Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to call this meeting to order of the Mayor and Board of Commissioners for February the 27th, 2024. Can I get the roll call, please?
Pauline Braun,
Here.
Emily Kleiner,
Here.
Dave Warnick,
Here.
Augie Pearson,
Here.
Mayor Marion.
Here.
Let the record show you have a quorum.
Thank you. Will you rise with me for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
this is our first meeting since the passing of Officer Stickney. Could we have a moment of silence for him tonight?
I think that would be a great idea, Augie. Will you bow your heads with me for a brief moment of silence? Thank you. I know on behalf of our town, our prayers are definitely with Kara and with Dan's family and brothers. We certainly plan to stay in touch with them and continue to show them love. All right, moving forward into a consent agenda, Town Administrator.
Yeah, the items that you have on your consent agenda are the approval of the 12/12/23 town meeting video summary. And I'm also recommending it at least through April if we could go back to having 2 meetings a month because we've got a heavy workload, especially with some budget work. So it might make sense to let the residents know we'll be meeting twice a month. And that would be the second and fourth Tuesday.
All right, can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any more discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Passes. Thank you. All right, moving forward into public presentations. Resolution 2024-01, Town Administrator.
Okay, Mayor, we've got a lot of stuff to cover tonight. Some of it is also pretty intricate, so I'm sort of saving the easier ones for the beginning of the meeting here. The first one that you have in front of you is Resolution 2024-01, and we had had some discussions about this last year. The town charges benefit assessment fees whenever there is a new EDU connection, estimated dwelling unit connection to the wastewater treatment system. In simple language, EDUs are the way the Maryland Department of the Environment allocates the amount of water and sewer that you can dispose in your community. And so when a community such as Rising Sun and many other communities need to charge impact fees for new users that jump in the system, it's based upon EDUs. I think it's important to note that the whole idea of benefit assessment fees is to offset to some degree the financial expense to residents who, as we all know very well, that over the last decade or so we've had to spend a lot of money to bring our wastewater treatment plant and water system into compliance, and that cost a certain amount of money. And so once those items were brought on board, that opens up opportunity for new investors to come into the community and want to jump on a state-of-the-art water system and wastewater treatment plant. But they really don't necessarily have any skin in the game in terms of the expenses that were paid to bring the infrastructure to the point where it was feasible for people to join the system. So I always sort of liken it to like if you were to join a country club, the residents that were in the country club paid membership fees to put the new tennis court on or swimming, the same membership fee. There might be some other fees associated with it because now they're getting a benefit that the original membership paid for. So that's sort of a loose way of looking at what benefit assessment fees are. So with the idea of how to best manage benefit assessment fees. And the approach that we've taken since 2016 or so has been very similar to the approach we've taken with lots of things in the town of Rising Sun, with the idea of every once in a while life gets in the way of our best intentions here. And so we don't want to make things so cost prohibitive that people can invest in the community in this case. So what we came up with, and I don't know if there's any other communities that do it, but if somebody were to invest in a property that they are going to own and they are required to pay benefit assessment fees because they're bringing a new EDU into the system, they have the ability to finance that over a 5-year period. That's what the town code stipulated, was that you could pay it back over a 5-year period. But we've come into a situation where we have some wonderful investments being made by local people in some of our commercial properties. And what I mean by that is you could build, but what if you're a resident or a local business that buys an old piece of property in the town of Rising Sun and spends a lot of money refurbishing it to put 4 or 5 units in there that other businesses can now come in and operate. Those benefit assessment fees, the way the ordinance was written, or the code was written right now, the 5-year payment plan was only available to owner-occupied residential properties. In other words, if Sally has a contractor build a house for her and she moves into this new house, she can spread the benefit assessment fee out over a 5-year period. And so we realized that if we want to continue to promote local entrepreneurs buying buildings that need to be fixed up, maybe we should open our horizons a little bit on how that local investment could spread that cost out over a longer period of time. So this is basically a resolution that is going to allow, we're going to change the 5-year payback term to a 7-year term to spread it out a little bit more, and we're going to open it up to essentially local businesses. You're going to see in here, it's not meant for the big conglomerates. And a name just comes to mind. I'm not picking on this particular entity, but let's say an Olive Garden came in here and they're a multi-mega corporation. We don't necessarily want to give them the ability to pay that benefit assessment fee out over a 7-year period. We would just be one of 1,000 restaurants they might happen to have in the area. So we want to make this more geared to the local business, the local mom and pop business that wants to get into the town and needs to get water and sewer from us. So if you're good with that basic premise, I will read the resolution into the minutes.
Please,
Okay.
thank you.
So we'll go past the standard boilerplate language. This is Resolution 2024-01. Whereas Chapter 9, titled Finance and Taxation, Business and Trade of the Town's Code of Ordinances, contains Article 6, titled Establishment of a Town Fee Schedule, which provides for the creation of a town fee schedule established by resolution and amended from time to time by the mayor and commissioners. And whereas the town's current fee schedule contains Section 5, titled Annexation, Stormwater Management, Land Development, and Zoning Fees, which provides for the establishment of benefit assessment fees associated with the development of land. And whereas subsection G, titled Benefit Assessment Fees, provides for the calculation and formula for total payments due based upon EDUs, discounts for early payment, and payment plans. Whereas subnote G3 specifically spells out a 5-year payment plan to allow owners of property to pay out the BAF fee over a 5-year period upon payment of an administrative charge to cover administration and processing. And whereas the mayor and commissioners would like to promote entrepreneurial business development and home ownership by introducing a payment plan initiative designed to lower financial barriers for residents aspiring to own a home or open a business within the community. This initiative aims to provide manageable financial solutions that support local economic growth, encourage residential stability, and foster a vibrant entrepreneurial ecosystem. Therefore, be it enacted and resolved that the mayor and commissioners of the town of Rising Sun are modifying Section 5 titled Annexation, Land Development, and Zoning Fees, Subnote G titled Benefit Assessment Fees, in order to change the benefit assessment payment plan to a 7-year schedule and to provide clear specifications on who is eligible for these plans as indicated below. Changes in formatting are not tracked in this resolution. However, changes and insertions of new text are indicated in red with an underline, and deleted text shall be indicated as strike through as shown below. So item G, benefit assessment fees. The following 4 benefit assessment fees, BAF, totaling $14,000 will be charged against any new construction, renovation, or newly defined EDU that results in a new or additional connection to the town's sewer and/or wastewater system above what is documented currently. The payment of this BAF is required before issuance of a final certificate of occupancy and shall include the following charges. And here, this is all existing language. We're not making any change to the dollar amount. The next change is in section G.1. The BAF shall be billed to the developer, builder, or property owner, and they may request one of the following payment options as follows. Here's just a little technical change. The concept is the same. We're making it clear that if the benefit assessment fee is paid at the time of issuance of a building permit, for cash flow benefit to the town, we will deduct $1,000 from the $14,000 charge. That's always been there. We're just making it more clear. The other option is full payment of the benefit assessment fee described in paragraph G above, is paid upon completion of construction and upon request for issuance of a certificate of occupancy. So that's where they would pay the full $14,000. This is where we get into some changes. The owner of the property may request a 7-year payment plan designed to support both local businesses and individual property owners located within the town and meeting the following prerequisites. Individual property owners who purchase a residential house for a personal occupancy not intended for use as a residential rental property. Local businesses that are independently owned and operated, not affiliated with nor operated by large developers or corporate enterprises, may qualify for a payment plan but are limited to 5 or fewer properties or tenant spaces under a payment plan at one time. Additionally, commercial projects that include commercial spaces with residential units on upper floors as spelled out in the town's zoning code can qualify for this program. This plan, collected through the accounting system, shall be secured through an agreement recorded in the land records of Cecil County with the owner responsible for all administrative fees associated with the recording. The plan necessitates full satisfaction of the payment of any outstanding payments as part of the plan immediately and must be satisfied upon transfer of ownership. The cost shall include a one-time 6% upfront administrative charge that does not cover the recordation fees. Administrative costs and recordation fees are non-refundable. All town guidelines regarding open outstanding balances owed to the town shall apply to include penalties for late payment, tax sale, and shut-off for services for non-payment. This option is not available to the builder or developer unless such builder or developer is the property owner of the subject property upon issuance of the certificate of occupancy. And then finally, this payment plan initiative is aimed at fostering local economic growth by providing manageable financial solutions to our small business sector, supporting residential stability for individual homeowners, enhancing opportunities for home ownership, and promoting local entrepreneurs to open businesses in town. By offering tailored financial arrangements, this program not only seeks to make home ownership more accessible, but also encourages local entrepreneurs to establish and grow their businesses within the community. This dual approach is designed to stimulate economic development, encourage long-term residential investment, and contribute to the overall vitality and entrepreneurial spirit of the area. That, in essence, is the intent of the resolution.
Thank you, Town Administrator. Can I get a motion to approve Resolution 2024-01?
Make a motion to adopt 2001
2024-01.
2024.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any more discussion?
This will apply to the new housing developments, correct?
Well, they won't be able to, the developer will not be able to get the benefit of it, because the developer is not going to own the house and live in the house.
No, but the individuals who own it will have the benefit of this.
Well, in reality, so let's look at that. In reality, if you were going to the settlement table, the benefit assessment fee is a requirement of the developer. So I don't think there's going to be too many homeowners that are going to agree at a settlement table to pay that benefit assessment fee. That would be rolled into the overall construction cost of the
Okay.
house.
But if somebody were to build their own house,
Yes.
this is where,
Yes.
or a small business owner, for
Yeah.
instance, et cetera. All right, is there any more discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
All right,
Aye.
Passes, thank you. Moving forward into, hold on 1 second,
The next
the
resolution.
next resolution, yes. Town Administrator, do you have that?
Yes, 2024-02. This is a fee schedule to take care of a couple loose ends in our fee schedule itself. But more importantly, it is aimed at addressing our responsibility to enforce FEMA floodplain regulations. So in a nutshell, what that is anyone, there's a program called the National Flood Insurance Program. And believe it or not, you can only buy that flood insurance at, I believe, at a premium rate if you are in a community that is recognized by the federal government as being a participant in the National Flood Insurance Program. And the way you qualify for that is that you enforce floodplain regulations. Now, in honesty, here's the rub. They are federal regulations that the federal government wants to have in place. And the reason why they are in place is because, you know, if you look at the situation Florida is going through right now, it's very hard to get homeowners insurance in Florida because the insurance companies get hammered down there by hurricanes and natural disasters. Well, one of the natural disasters that can occur is when areas flood. And so essentially the federal government went around decades ago and did some scientific surveys, and they determined where areas are prone to flooding. And they put those on what is called a firm map, and they're designated as a floodplain. And basically what that does is it calculates how high floodwater would rise above or to a certain point when a community got a 100-year storm. So it's not designed for your standard July midsummer storm. It's designed for the ones that are supposed to come every 100 years. But as we know, we've got like 6 of them in the last 10 years here. And so when you have properties that are located in those floodplain areas, the federal government doesn't come in and enforce the regulations. They tell you as a local municipality, you have to do it. And if you don't do it, if you don't adopt an ordinance and regulations, and if you don't enforce it, then none of your residents can qualify for flood insurance. And so they hold a hammer over municipalities to do the enforcement. And so when you look at that, there are a lot of responsibilities that the town has, and I think it's important for you guys to recognize this, because you understand why the fees are there. You guys have heard us talk about this before, where you have a base flood elevation that the federal government has determined that when the 100-year flood comes, the water's going to rise to this level above sea level. And it's not a correlation that the sea is going to rise that high. It's just a correlation that the topography in the area and the water that's in the area will bottle it up to a point that it will rise to a level that is that level above sea level. So when you look at the town of Rising Sun, the town of Rising Sun, as a general rule of thumb, is about maybe 295, anywhere from 275 to like 305 feet above sea level. But we have areas in the town that are as low as 293. And when the base flood elevation is earmarked to go to 300 feet, they're basically saying that when a 100-year flood comes in, water will rise 6 feet above the ground level, which will damage properties. And then that results in insurance companies and financial loss, so forth and so on. And so what the feds want us to do is to regulate those properties. Now, part of the regulation of those properties is that properties that are located in a floodplain area and were there before the floodplain area was designated, for all intents and purposes, are grandfathered until 50% of the damage that occurs to a structure or renovations of the structure equal more than 50% of the value of the structure. So let's take a look at what the end game of the feds were. The feds, this is my summation of this. The feds and the people in FEMA probably said, if we had it our way, we would be able to come in and automatically make every structure that's in a floodplain area have to be removed. Well, that wasn't going to work. And so they had to essentially go back and come up with more of a compromise. And so the compromise they came up with is if floodwaters go into a structure and they damage it, and the cost of repairing those damages is more than 50% of the value of the structure, then the structure cannot remain in the floodplain area unless it is raised to a level 2 feet above the base flood elevation. That is called freeboard. So it's basically a 2-foot buffer above what the estimated flood level is supposed to be. And so if an individual incurred more than 50% damage to their property, they would have to not only repair it, but they would have to be able to raise it 2 feet above the base flood elevation. And that can vary depending upon where you're located at. However, there is another delineation in the floodplain called a floodway. And a floodway is right along the banks of tributary streams and rivers. And basically what the FEMA regulation says, that if you incur more than 50% damage, you cannot put it back in the floodway regardless of whether you raise it up or not. Now here's the other thing that FEMA did, was if somebody has a building located in a floodplain area and they decide to put a new roof on it, if they decide to put new carpets in it, if they update the siding, if they update the floor, if they update the electric, all of that becomes part of a 50% damage. They treat it that way. And you are required to hold on to that estimate for multiple years, meaning that, let's say a property was valued at $20,000 and it had $5,000 worth of damage to it. It would not trigger the 50%. But if it came back multiple times and updated the heater and then updated the electric and updated that, and that dollar amount got over $10,000, then it triggers the FEMA regulations. And I'm suspecting that the reason why they did that is because they found people that had 50% damage in their structure trying to drag the repair out over multiple years. So they didn't come to them with one invoice saying, to fix my unit, I got to spend X amount of money. So FEMA got smart to that and said, let's accumulate that over a period of time. The bottom line is we're the ones who have to review that. And if we don't review it, FEMA can come in and basically remove the town of Rising Sun from the National Flood Insurance Program, which can have negative consequences to our residents. So basically what we've done here is developed a fee schedule that will automatically trigger when somebody is doing something in the floodplain area. We have to take a look at it. We have to review it against the floodplain regulations, and we have to track the dollar amount of what they are doing. So all the fees that you see in here, and I'm not going to go into all of them, and if you guys are good, we can consider this read in to the meeting minutes.
All right.
Okay. And so, we're reading in fee schedule amendment, FEMA floodplain reviews permitting charges for town services. So this goes on to explain exactly what I said in detail of what our obligation is. But while we were in here, there's a couple more things that we wanted to clean up in the document. So I'm going to scroll through these. You have it in front of you. The people watching online can see the areas where we're basically talking about floodplain compliance reviews if it's applicable. I want to be clear. If you submit a building permit to the town of Rising Sun, but the building is not in a floodplain, it doesn't affect you. But if you have a building that's in a floodplain, this does affect you. And this is basically a mandate coming down from us from the feds. So where you see all the red in here are the different areas where we would have to do some extensive reviews, and it's only fair that we charge a fee for doing that. So all the first couple pages is all of the fees related to floodplain stuff. And then the other area that I want to jump to is, so we have non-residential building permits, plumbing, mechanical, residential, and agricultural. We have our fire code that we enforce, so when people do work related to fire sprinklers, alarm systems, that all triggers a review if they're in the floodplain. There are other constructions that can happen in a floodplain. Let's remember, a floodplain will pick up anything that's not tied down in a floodplain area. So if somebody's looking to do demolition, install a fuel tank underground, above ground, we need to make sure that's compliant with the floodplain regulation. So when you're in this area of other construction fees, that will trigger that. In the floodplain regulations, anyone who has to deal or comply with the floodplain regulations, there are certain provisions in the floodplain regulations that somebody can request a variance for. And I want to be clear that, like all the other building codes, financial hardships are never considered as a reason to get a variance, because at the end of the day, somebody falling and getting hurt or dying in a fire or an explosion or drowning, it doesn't happen just because the repair was going to cost a lot of money to do it. So that's sort of the elementary way that code enforcement interprets that kind of stuff. That's not our requirement. That's a nationally recognized requirement. In the land development fees, segue to what we did here. If you remember, we started charging escrow fees for land development to cover the cost associated with engineering review. And we talked about at every round of the land development process, escrow fees had to be resupplied. We just cleaned up the language a little bit to make it clear that if you have any fees left over from one phase to the next, that would be credited towards the total amount that you have to have to start the next one. That was a little ambiguous. I'm gonna jump down, a lot of this is all your FEMA stuff, and I wanna jump into an area called administrative fees. And these are fees that people have to pay for unique individual services from the town. And I want to segue to something you've always heard me say. When we talked about the FEMA review, I've always said that the little old lady on a fixed income in Rising Sun should not have to have their real estate tax paid for a service that's really only benefiting one individual. That individual should bear the brunt of it. Otherwise, you would have to raise real estate taxes to cover those expenses. So that's why the FEMA fees are called out, because not everybody should have to bear the brunt of paying or covering that administrative cost. Well, likewise, we often get requests for either police officers, public works, or a variety of other services that we are called to provide assistance for. And there's a lot of overtime and expense related to that. And this goes back to the mindset again of not having everybody collectively in the town having to pay for a service that's only benefiting a select group or select individuals. So what you see is a new section I that says request for town services at non-sanctioned functions. Any event or activities held within the town that are not officially supported by the town or are not organized and sponsored by entities listed as exempt in the town's Community Alliance Code, such as Cecil County Schools, the Community Fire Department of Rising Sun, etc., will be required to compensate for any town services utilized. The compensation rate will be 1.5 times the regular pay of the involved town employees, applicable to all employees regardless of their position or whether they are salaried or hourly workers. So I want to make it clear. Fire companies doing something, Little League's doing something, that charge doesn't apply. The chamber doing Sunfest doesn't apply. The town doing Winterfest, Spectacular, doesn't apply. It would apply if we were doing the color fun runs we used to do in the past. If you remember, one group wanted to shut down the town square to have a fundraiser for drug addiction and stuff. So if somebody wants to do different events and use town facilities, we can't just say, yeah, it sounds good. We got to provide police protection. We have to provide public works. That should not be borne, again, by the little old lady on a fixed income. So that's what this resolution is geared to close the loop on.
Thank you, Town Administrator. Could I have a motion to approve Resolution 2024-02, which is the fee schedule FEMA and town services?
I make a motion, for 2024-02 resolution, fee schedule amendment.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussions concerning this? Town Administrator, this is posted online, correct?
It will be once they're
Okay.
adopted.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Passes. Thank you. Thank you. Moving forward into ordinance 2024-01, which is development guest and visitor parking. Town Administrator?
Yeah, so this is an ordinance, and to recap real quickly, when we adopt ordinances, we adopt them and they can sit until the next meeting, or they can be passed as an emergency ordinance. And that's sort of the standard way ordinances are done, except when you're proposing to make changes to the zoning code. At that point, the ordinance has to present it to the board has to accept it, and basically recommend that it be turned over to the planning commission to do either a formal review or take one more look at it. Because a lot of the work that we do in the zoning code comes out of workshops that are done at the planning commission level. And so in this particular case, the planning commission is very aware of what is in this ordinance. So I'm not going to read the whole ordinance in, but it explains what the intent is. And so from a summary standpoint, what this is looking to do is currently in our zoning code, and you will find it in a lot of municipal zoning codes, there's a provision called off-street parking. And when somebody wants to build a residential development, they have to provide a minimum number of off-street parking. And that can be achieved by having a driveway large enough to handle the number of vehicles, or a garage combination driveway that can handle the number of vehicles. We are consistent with a lot of communities in that our off-street parking requirements are 2. And so we're not looking to change that. But there's a lot of ambiguity in the existing zoning code when it comes to not only off-street parking, but there's a gap that happens on what about guests and visitors that come. So let me walk you through the off-street parking. 20 years ago, vehicles were probably basically all the same size. But as we know now, we have vehicles that can be as small as 12 feet long and 6 feet wide and maybe shorter. And we can have pickup trucks that can be every bit of 25 feet long here. So, and if you ride down through our community, you see all different sizes. Well, if we just say you have to provide off-street parking, what is prohibiting a developer from building a garage that he said, hey, it's large enough for the little car? And we don't stipulate that it has to be a minimum size. And the driveway, if they're going to put a driveway in and they come to us and say, that driveway is big enough for 2 vehicles, heck, it's big enough for 4 vehicles. But although we have language in our zoning code that talks about the parking requirements for commercial, it's a little bit of a reach to extrapolate to pull those sizes into the residential, although we're still talking the same thing. So in our code right now, it requires commercial parking spaces to be 18 by 9. And that's sort of skirting the bare minimum of what you would need. So what this code is going to do is it's going to stipulate the size that is required to meet off-street parking limitations. So what I mean by that is somebody is required to provide 2 off-street parking spaces, and they're going to do a single-car driveway and a garage, and they're going to say that meets the expectation. We're going to say, well, in order to get credit for the garage has to be a certain distance and a certain width. Otherwise, your standard vehicle is not going to fit in there. And the driveway the same way. It has to have certain sizes associated with it. And in addition to that, we all know that we have residential developments that parking on the road is really bad right now for a variety of reasons. Developers got away with developing these developments and not meeting town codes. But we also want to make sure going forward that we don't inadvertently create parking issues for our residents because off-street parking was required, but the homeowner came in and finished in the garage. Or the homeowner did something to the driveway that instead of it being wide enough for 2 cars, it's only wide enough for 1. We're not saying that the homeowner can't do that. We're just saying that you can't do it to the extent of reducing the number of off-street parking spaces that are permitted. And in our zoning code, we allow people to make their driveway a little bit wider in front of their house. So if they want to close in their garage, fine, but they have to also widen the driveway. Because this is what happens if we don't do that. And this is the second part of this ordinance, is that when you build a residential development, we know that we have issues now on July 4th picnics, Thanksgiving, Christmas, bar mitzvahs, birthday parties. People come in, and some of our roads are just not wide enough. And it ends up being that fire trucks and police cars and ambulances can't get down the street. We have a provision in our code that says the developer shall provide enough on-street parking to meet the expected demand of the residential neighborhood. Well, what is that? And who's interpreting that? So this ordinance it has some definitions that support it, but I'm going to jump to the section that I'm about to talk about, is that we're creating a new table that's going to talk about residential on-street guest and overflow parking. And so what we've done is basically said that if a residential development wants to build 50 or fewer residential developments, they have to pave their street wide enough for 2 parking spaces for each of the residential homes that are built. And the reason why this should ring a bell with you is, if you remember a couple months ago, we wanted to get out of the business of automatically paving roads so wide that big houses that sit off the road never park on the street, and you create drag strips because there's no traffic calming in there. So we basically said a developer can pave a road 22 feet wide with no parking on each side if they choose to do that. And that 22 feet allows the passage of basically 2 fire trucks to pass each other, because those are the largest vehicles we're going to have on the road, or a fire truck and a trash truck. And so if the developer decides to pave a road to only 22 feet wide, this is going to say, all right, you're building a residential development, unless you provide enough off-street parking. So in this case, it would be 2 off-street parking spaces and then 2 additional parking spaces to accommodate what's required out on the road. Otherwise, you're going to have to build what we're calling satellite parking. And you see that in a lot of newer developments that have been built, where they provide guest parking for residential properties in some other location. So this is basically creating an a la carte menu where the developer, quite frankly, can pick their poison to decide what will do good for selling their units, but they have to meet our expectations and our requirements. We're not giving anything away. We're allowing them to figure the best way to accommodate that. And so you see the breakdown here. If you're building 51 to 100 homes, you would have to provide 1 parking space on the street. If you're building 101 to 200, you have to provide 3/4 of a parking space for each home. And if you're over 200, you have to provide half a parking space. The reason why we're doing it that way is because when you get in these larger developments, you have a lot of linear footage of streets that are more than going to accommodate that additional parking that's out there. And so having a residential development of 200 homes provide 400 parking spaces out on the street itself, you might never have that ever being used. Now, in the same token, we're not trying to calculate all 100 homes having a July 4th picnic or Thanksgiving. So we're trying to find a happy medium that should be able to accommodate enough parking. So that is what this one is doing, this ordinance is doing. It's also talking about in here how wide the garage has to be, how deep it has to be. But we're also giving the developer the ability to and this is what it comes down to. The developer can say, I've got 2,000 linear feet of road. Do I want to pay the expense of paving it 8 feet wider to put parking on the street, which is going to cost a boatload of money to pave it? He also has to deal with stormwater management regulations, so he's got to build his retention ponds bigger. And down the road, when that all gets dedicated over to the town, we are plowing more, we're paving more when it has to be done, and we're making upgrades potentially to stormwater management ponds. And so the motivating factor here is to have the developer say, you know what, instead of building my house 25 feet from the road, which is what the minimum code says, I'm going to make it 40 feet off the road. That's not going to cost me any money. I can make the driveway a little bit wider, a little bit longer, pass that on to the person who buys it, but I don't have to pave 2,000 linear feet of 8 feet of paving. And so that's one of the ways we're, again, making it sort of an a la carte menu to create more flexibility in design in the development. So if you guys are good with this, I would just need a motion to forward it to the Planning Commission for review. Once they review it, we would schedule a public hearing like we've done in the other zoning ordinances for public comment in the future.
Could I get that motion to send ordinance number 2024-01 to the Planning Commission?
Make a motion.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any more discussion?
Again, you're not adopting this tonight. You're just saying take it to the next level of review.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Thanks, Town Administrator. All right, next on the agenda is ordinance 2024-02, which is the employment center zoning.
Okay, so in the towns, and again, this is a zoning change. So again, I'm not going to go into all the boilerplate of the ordinance. I'm going to give you, it's actually going to be, another detailed explanation because this is a really interesting zoning district that if we can do this, will reap a lot of benefits for the town of Rising Sun down the road. And I'll get into those things. But one of the things I wanted to highlight here before I get into that is a zoning code has zoning districts. The ones we're more familiar with are residential zoning districts. And ours are broken down into rural estate, rural residential, R1, R2, R3, and then we have a mobile home. And then we have central commercial, light commercial. You guys remember all the exercises we went through a year and a half ago to update those. Well, part of the comprehensive plan called for the creation of an employment center zone. And the town designated certain properties that are in the incorporated limits of Rising Sun as an employment center zone. But it also, if you remember in your comprehensive plan, you are required to anticipate where you might be interested in the town growing. And as part of the state regulations, you're supposed to identify how that land will be used if you grow and bring it into your town. Normally all you're required to do is say it's going to be used for residential, it's going to be used for commercial, industrial, whatever. We went one step further and we created zoning that said if those properties that are not in town want to annex in, we have them earmarked for a certain type of zoning. They can request a downgrade of the zoning, but they can't request an upgrade of the zoning. And when we talk about a down zone, we're talking about less intensity and less density, and vice versa. An uptick is more of that. So we created these zoning districts, but one of the, when you determine how you're going to manage your zoning districts, there are essentially 4 areas of the zoning code that you do that in. One is in a definition section. The other is in a section that we're going to cover tonight that basically lists the zoning district and has some general criteria. The third area is a table of permissible uses that I'm going to show you that in a second. And within the table of permissible uses, it may or may not direct you to certain conditions that have to apply. And so what I mean by that is no zoning code just allows everything as a use by right. It's unrealistic to have a zoning district that just allows everything as a use by right because you give up your control of what happens in your community. So if a community wants to have a level of control and to be involved in the planning, they can do what is permitted with conditions, which you go to that fourth section and it'll say you can do it, but you have to meet these conditions. The other way is to have a special exception. And so you can permit a use in a zoning district, but require a special exception. And that too will take you to a fourth section of the code that will get into some details that's basically saying, because of the uniqueness of it, the planning commission and the residents through public meetings should have some transparency on some of these issues. So those are the four ways that you do it. The problem that we have here is that when you look at a table of permissible uses, and I'm going to bring up the existing table of permissible uses in our town. Give me 1 second, I'm going to scroll to it here. So when you look at the table of permissible uses here, you can see where it lists all kinds of uses that they decided were something they need to pay attention to back in 1974 when this zoning code was created. And I don't know if they updated it over the years. My point is, there are certain types of businesses listed here that nobody ever does anymore. I mean, you might be hard pressed to find a typesetter anymore when everything is digital graphics. So that's sort of an example of that. And so when you look at the table of permissible uses, you can see where at the top here, it has the various zoning districts that were in place at that time. And then down in the column, it has designations of P, which would mean you could just do it. You still might have to go through land development process, but you don't have to get any variances or special exceptions. And then you have permitted with conditions that I talked about, and then special exceptions. Back in the day, they had special conditions. They're sort of redundant. And so our problem has been when we have been trying to incorporate all the other zoning districts that we created, we also had to go in and try to tackle all these various uses, make sure that we want them where we want them to be, and then make sure that we identify other uses along the way. And it's not as easy as just updating the table of permissible uses for one zoning district, because then you can create some really significant conflicts and contradictory language in your code. And so when you look at this old outdated table of permissible uses and then compare it to the one that the Planning Commission has been working on over the years, you can see that now you have the new zoning designations that are in here, and we have been trying to pencil in, create better language for what is already out there. For instance, we have language that's redundant in terms of a two-family dwelling versus a duplex. What really is the difference? And as we've talked about before, in our town codes and our zoning codes, it almost feels like people in the past just said, let's just go to Port Deposit, borrow their language, we'll put it in here, and there wasn't maybe enough evaluation to make sure there wasn't redundancy or conflicts created. And so it's been a heavy lift to try to get all of this going at one time so we don't create redundancies. But what we decided to do is one of our most exciting districts that we are looking to create is an employment center district. And so what we have come up with is that we can leave the table of permissible uses the way it is now and continue to work on all the other zoning districts and all the 75 different variations of uses that are identified, and then put everything that's needed to know about employment center in the section that talks about employment center. And that'll make sense here in a second when I show you what I'm talking about. I think it's important to note this is not ready for adoption. It's taken everything working through the Department of Planning and Juanita, and the chief will tell you, I've spent hundreds of hours with the Department of Planning on phone conferences, going through all the legal ramifications of what's being done. And so we're going to take all this stuff and we're going to put it in a particular section of the code that will cover everything that's needed to know about the employment center zoning. And when we update the table of permissible uses, we'll just have to slide those ideas into the table of permissible uses here. Because the way it is now, a lot of our zoning districts are still pretty operable in the way they are. There aren't a lot of glaring issues in them. And so basically what this is a zoning district that was created, and I'll read you the whereas on this page. The EC Employment Center District was created as part of the town's 2018 comprehensive plan and was designed and intended to establish commercial type uses that provide large employment populations, including offices, research, hospitals, and manufacturing uses that are located in parts of a campus-like form with access provided from internal access streets that combine commercial facilities with other types of uses such as light industrial uses or additional community facilities such as library, branch, meeting areas to create community focal points. The EC zone is strategically designed as an economic ecosystem aimed at fostering a vibrant community by attracting and cultivating high-impact jobs that offer middle-income pay. This initiative is not only about enhancing employment opportunities for all residents, but also about improving their overall quality of life and to create a synergy between the economic employment and residential components of the EC district, which will not only bolster the local economy by keeping spending within the community, but also attracts a skilled workforce, increase home values, and improve the business climate for many of our small mom and pop businesses. So essentially what I'm saying there, when we're talking about an ecosystem sort of feeds itself. Different components feed each other in that. And so basically, look, we talked about this in other avenues over the years. We don't have any job centers really in the area of the town of Rising Sun. We have the Martin Supermarket. We have Calvert Nursing Home that has a good number of people. But we've all joked about if you go from Pennsylvania to Rising Sun, Route 1, at 7 o'clock in the morning, you can see a trail of cars leaving this area. 273 the same way, 274, Route 1 going the other way. There's no employment centers here. But yet, we have a very stable median household income in this community. Our houses are selling at top dollar. Our schools are great. Wouldn't it be nice if, and especially since we have these developers that are coming in to want to develop properties for middle-income homes, wouldn't it be nice to keep the employment here? Wouldn't it be nice to create an opportunity where people are only traveling a couple miles to get to work? Wouldn't it be nice if they're not just going to work at a McDonald's Not saying that is not valuable, but what we're trying to do is to create middle income wages where people can afford the housing, where people have disposable income to go to Rise and Grind, Bog Turtle, Hatchers, and all the other entities that are trying to open up and move into the town. So that part of the ecosystem is providing good paying jobs that people are going to the local mom and pop businesses. And they're also investing in the housing stock. And when the housing stock goes up, that poker chip that I always talk about for every homeowner goes up too, because the value of your home goes up. When one person wins in this scenario, the goal is for everybody to win in the scenario. So when you look at the actual language here, at the currently in our code, we already adopted an employment center zoning district. And the language is already in there of what somebody can do at an employment center zoning district and what types of businesses we're looking for. But we want to expand upon that. And there's a long narrative here about what we're looking to try to accomplish. And we're trying, we're looking for primary businesses to move in, the big businesses. Maybe Christiana Healthcare, in their struggles with what's going on in Hartford County, says, you know what? Let's open a medical center down on Route 1 and provide good paying jobs in a medical center. Maybe some technology research is looking for locations. Our sewer plant is a gold mine for light industrial entities that need water for cooling. And we have the ability to sell effluent water to some of these businesses. We have state-of-the-art water and sewer. So we are really becoming an attractive niche for that type of stuff. We're not looking to put it in our downtown area. We want to put it on the Route 1 corridor, where most of the traffic is coming and going and leaving Rising Sun, but they're stopping in there for jobs, so forth and so on. So in this code, we're creating basically a primary sector that is designed to attract all the hospitals and the nursing homes and good paying jobs. And then we're talking about secondary sectors where it could be an office building for medical billing, accounting offices, whatever. And then we're creating ancillary uses, which would be all your restaurants, your package shipping stores. In other words, we don't want to take the employment center and fill it up with a bunch of McDonald's and Chick-fil-A's that are going to go in there first. We don't want to fill it up with a bunch of gas stations. This is going to be our one shot to really attract some high-paying jobs to the area. So we want to have ancillary uses, but we want them to be in proportion to the primary uses and complementary to those primary uses. The other thing that we are doing here to try to attract this is we are creating incentives for income wages. You ask yourself, what does somebody have to make to be considered making a middle income wage? Well, that is in relation to the area that you're located in, because cost of living can be different in different areas. And so what we're basically doing is saying that any business that has 50% of its workforce compensated at or above 80% of the 5-year average of Maryland's median income as determined by the most recent U.S. Census data would get tax incentives. And I'm going to show you how beneficial those are to the town also, and that are designed to make this attractive. So we're providing an incentive for them to not only bring in those high-paying jobs because they can get a reduction in their real estate tax, their sewer and water bills, their income tax, their personal property tax, their impact fees, their benefit assessment fees, their debt service, adequate public facilities. You get the point. We have a lot of things we normally charge. well, we can provide an incentive which makes us competitive with Hartford County and other areas of Elton for people to say, hey, I want to go to Rising Sun to open up my business. We have to make sure that we are competitive in that. We're also going to create an incentive that if they earmark a certain number of those jobs for people who live in the town of Rising Sun, if they're qualified, we want them to get preferential treatment. We want to take care of our own. We want our people that are qualified to have those jobs before somebody someplace else. So there's incentives that are built in for that. But in order for this to work, we also have to accentuate this district by creating some workforce housing here. We need to make sure we have housing for all types of people. And we're going to have properties that are going to be rented. And anyone who rents a mom and pop business will tell you the saving grace is when you could put residential over top of it, because residential rental is much more stable than a mom and pop business coming and going. So we're sort of talking about bring in these retail and mom and pop businesses, and we'll let you go to 2 stories and a little bit bigger if you put some residential housing in there that's market rate housing in there. So that's, this goes on to talk about the key elements of it. You can read it. We'll have this available for people. There's still some work that needs to be done by the Planning Commission. Another important area here, this is not going to work if we just allow a developer to have complete control over how things are done. We can, in an employment center, have some developers that recognize that it's going to be beneficial for them in the town by controlling the way this development is done, but we might have other employment centers where they're not. And so we are trying to talk about what type of businesses we want and what type we don't want in this particular area. So you see on page 13 or 14, using the work that we have done at the Planning Commission to redefine uses, we've identified things that we really don't want in this employment center meeting. We don't want a car salesman down there who's taking up 5 acres and with 4 employees and trying to sell, 500 cars. That's not going to move the needle economically for the town. So there's a whole host of things in here that we don't want to have in those areas, but there's a lot of robust things that we do want to have in those areas. So the other thing that I want to show you here, and this is on the screen, the median, in order to determine middle income, I said it's based upon the median wage of an individual based upon census data. And middle income, when it's researched by different research agencies, has determined that middle income is anywhere from 67% to 200% of the average. And so I chose 80%. I just threw it against the wall as that number. And so when you look at the Maryland mean earnings of an individual over the last 5 years, the census says it's $70,700. So by us starting out by saying that anyone who offers salaries that are 80% of that Maryland mean earnings level would get the benefit, that means they're providing salaries that start at $56,000. As we go through this project, we might decide we want to make that higher, might want to make it lower, but that's a starting point for this. So I wanted to show you that. The other thing that I have done is when you look at affordable housing or housing within the reach of people, the Maryland Department of Community Housing and Development says that 30% of wages is a safe market number to determine how much somebody should be paying for their mortgage. And so basically what I'm doing here is doing a calculation of these different salary points and then showing what somebody should be able to afford by the Department of Housing, whether it's a mortgage or rent that they have to pay. So that's just backup information that I am giving you for that. The other item that I wanted to cover for you is when we start to look at the incentive program itself, if everybody's on board with this as we go through it, we're going to come back to the elected body with a totally separate legislation that's going to create a Rising Sun Workforce Enterprise Incentive Program. The reason why I'm doing that is the feds, the state, and the county can create enterprise zones. And enterprise zones are meant to create incentives for people to develop to a certain play sheet. We have to really create our own. Now, my goal is if we can get the county to see the value in this, maybe they would partner with us in some of these incentives on the county tax side. In other words, the county gives, and don't quote me on this, they give like 10-year tax forgiveness that's ratcheted, slowly weaned out. They do like fast track permitting if somebody builds in an enterprise zone. We're basically creating this program here, and you guys have a copy of that, that sort of lays out the eligibility criteria for our own personal workforce enterprise zone where we can create incentives. An important thing to note, we recognize that we have central commercial zoning in our community that would allow the same type of businesses that would be permitted in the employment center zoning. So we're initially saying that all the locations that are in an employment center zone would qualify for these benefits. Someone that's on land that's at least 15 acres in central commercial would also be able to qualify for this workforce incentive, meaning that it doesn't really move the needle very much for the town to provide all these incentives for somebody who's bringing in a business with 5 employees, and because the manager of the business makes more than $56,000, they're getting a significant tax, benefit from that. So we want to avoid that, and then I want to show you how these tax incentives could look here. So what I've done is, if you look at the kind of properties that are currently in town and could come to town, let me go back to this one here. You can see where we're talking about, and I give an example here in the document, a property that's valued at $10 million. And that's not hard to reach. We have a lot of commercial properties in our community that are valued at $10 million. So if somebody comes in the workforce, there's going to be a minimum number of employees. If the workforce is over 50%, meets that threshold, then they would get a tax incentive that would be a 10% discount, $46,000 of real estate tax to the town. They would get $4,600 in tax savings. The benefit assessment fees, if somebody needs 10 EDUs on their property, that has a value of $145,000 to the town. If they drive good jobs to the community, again, this is not designed to benefit the town being this building. It's designed to benefit our residents as a whole and to motivate people to want to relocate here to provide business or jobs. They could get a $35,000 discount on the $140,000 benefit assessment fee they have to pay. If someone consumes over 5,000 gallons per day or 60,000 gallons a month, their monthly water bill would be $2,640 or $31,680 per year. If they were to get a 25% discount for that, they would save $7,840 on that. I'm going to jump down to the bottom. In that scenario that I gave you, even with those benefits, the town, for that one business that we were able to motivate to come to the town, is still going to pay the town $23,840 a year and a sewer and water bill. To put that in perspective, we pay, one of our debt service bills is $88,000 for one of our sewer and water bills. So you can see right off the bat, we're getting a big chunk, which goes to our ability to lower the sewer and water rates for our residents. That's always been our goal. So the town would still receive $23,000 in utility bills, would still receive $2,880 a year in debt service, would still receive $41,400 in real estate tax, for a total yield of $68,120, and that doesn't include the adequate public facilities and income tax and personal property tax that would come along too. So here's another thing that I would like to do, or I'm proposing. You take the same building that has a value of $10 million. It generates $46,000 of real estate tax. If we were to give that property, who brought that business in, that had the employees meeting the minimum threshold, and we gave them a 20% discount on the real estate tax for the first 5 years, they would save $9,200 a year in real estate tax. But the town would still get $36,800 in real estate tax. And then if we only gave a 10%, which is what the previous formula was, the town was still going to generate $41,400. Here's another idea I have. If we would allocate 2% of the commercial business real estate tax to create a revolving loan for mom and pop businesses to be able to take a loan out to redo the cafe seating, to put a new window front in, to get new electronic components, buy a new hood or a stove or something like that. We could earmark some of this money coming in from commercial to help our mom and pop businesses so they don't get left behind in the process. So the exercise I'm showing here is that on a $10 million property, if we allocated 2%, we'd only be giving up $736 of real estate tax. Now that's not going to move the needle in providing loans. If it was 5%, it would be $1,840. And then you see the $20 million scenario. What if it's $50 million? What if we have 4 businesses come into that employment center area, and the total assessed value is $50 million? Let me put that in perspective. The Martin Shopping Center is $25 million. So it's not pie in the sky to see that kind of realization. At $50 million, we could generate $9,200 of money to allocate for our small businesses. If you considered collecting $150 million of assessed value throughout the community at $690,000, now we're creating a revolving loan fund of $27,600. I know it's a lot of information. This has been worked on for many years, and the Planning Commission's put a lot of time in it. Jay's put a lot of time into it, the engineering firm. As you can see, we're excited by this because this is sort of cutting edge stuff that we think we can really provide a benefit not only to our community to lower rates, keep real estate taxes low, potentially maybe get rid of the business personal property tax to make it more beneficial for businesses to operate in town, because not every community charges personal property. Create revolving loan funds, bring jobs in, disposable income. And we're not, this isn't going to be whitewashed, so let me make it clear. The land mass is not large enough for a Bel Air or whitewash situation. We're talking 200-300 acres tops is all we're doing. So we're not going to drastically change the landscape of the community. And I'll leave you with this, because we always run into this issue. At the end of the day, we all talk about landowners' rights. And sometimes some folks get sideways in forgetting that landowners have the right to develop their property. We are not just sitting back and saying, develop it the way you want. We're trying to get more control over the way that development is done, because ultimately they have the right to do something. Let's make sure it's good for the town and create incentives to get to realize that and get it to happen. So I apologize for how long it took, but it's a lot of information to throw at you.
Thank you, Town Administrator. Are we going to be sending this back to the Planning Commission, or is this something we're approving?
You would send it, the same as the other one, you'd make a motion to forward it to the plan.
Could I get a motion to approve sending ordinance 2024-02, the Employment Center zoning, to the Planning
Motion
Commission?
made.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? I know that the State Planning Commission, you've worked along with them on this,
Yes,
Calvin.
I'd be remiss to not mention
I
that.
do want to say thank you for doing that. I know it's taken a
Absolutely.
long time. Certainly, working with that state agency, it does take time, so thank you. Did you already cover the adequate public facilities work, or do you need to do that?
This would be really short. In everything that I just mentioned, in terms of why we need to control our destiny, we need to control the narrative. You hear me saying that all the time. Don't let anybody else control our narrative. Just like we did at the turn of the century in 2000, the town was faced with significant infrastructure upgrades. The sewer and water is good for maybe another 10 years, but we're going to start seeing some wear and tear on it. But we have undersized water lines, we have streets that need to be redone, we have water meters that need to be redone, we have I&I, to the tune of, if we said we were going to do all this stuff in the next 5 years, we're looking at about $23 million. That we're going to be in a situation like previous boards were of kicking the can down the road and leaving it for someone else. Adequate public facility fees are a methodology to make sure that when that new development comes in, they are paying for the increased wear and tear on those systems, and we're putting money set aside that's earmarked for capital investment projects over a 10-year period. And so I said it's $23 million if we did it now. We took a median average of cost of living throughout the high numbers. If we wait another 10 years to initiate this, we're looking at upwards of $32 million of infrastructure costs. To drive it home, the residents are paying dearly for $26 million of infrastructure costs. That's what we've been battling to try to bring down. So we're looking at this at the same time in all the work that we're doing.
Thank you, Town Administrator. Moving forward into citizens' input, would anyone like to speak this evening? Hearing none, moving forward into staff reports. Town Administrator.
I'm good.
Okay. Chief.
I'll try to be quick. A couple of things. On February 7th, we hosted Coffee with the Cop. Some of our invitees included the Cecil County Sheriff's Office K-9 unit. We had quite a bit of people that attended. It was a pretty good time, and we got to discuss a lot of law enforcement stuff with those people in the community. Next, back in 2022, we ordered some vehicles. Those vehicles have finally made it through the production process, and they are here. So we are outfitting a few new vehicles, and they should be on the road here shortly. They will have a little different design to them than what we're used to, but I believe it's similar to the rebranding of any, commercial business. You'll see a little bit of difference that will stand out to the citizens of the town. Also, because of the supply chain, back in March of 2023, we took advantage of a grant that was offered by the state of Maryland through the Maryland State Police for some speed enforcement signs. The signs were ordered, they were in production, and it took until now. It's been almost a year. They are supposed to be delivered here shortly. So I'm hoping that we're sticking with the delivered shortly again because, like I said, it's been a year, and hopefully it'll be here soon. That'll help us meet some of the requests for speed enforcement and speed notification along some of the roads here in town. And lastly, for me, we haven't met since January, but we all know that we lost one of our officers, Dan Stickney. It was a very traumatic event for a police department of our size to try to do what's best for his family and do it during a snowstorm in about an hour's drive away from here. But law enforcement's a family, so we reached out to Harford County Sheriff's Office. They provided me with a lot of assistance, along with Chief Yates from Northeast and some representatives from Cecil County Sheriff's Office. We were able to provide a service for our fallen officer, and I want to thank everybody that was involved with that. It was a difficult time for us, and still is a difficult time for us. And I'd still like to just reach out and say, to the family that we are here. We're a family, and we're going to continue to be family to them, even though our brother is no longer with us. And that's my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Town Attorney.
Good evening, everybody. As you know, one of the biggest things we've been dealing with in the last month, and it's longer than that, but it's starting to see fruition, is the process for the PUD special exception for the Knutson property. So we had our public hearing in front of the Planning Commission last week, and now we're getting ready to meet with the developer so they can sharpen their pencils and get ready for the actual Board of Zoning Appeals hearing. That should happen in the next month, I'd say, maybe less time than that. And that's critical because that will open up that property to what the intent was under your master plan. And so I appreciate the support you've all had. I know Commissioner Pearson came to the hearing and offered his support as well, and I think that is helpful. So this is the first time we've done this in ever, I think, as far as Rising Sun goes. So that's what we've been spending most of our time on. I have other things that I can talk to you about when we have an admin session, but that's the important part for everybody to know.
Thank you, Jay. Moving forward into the mayor's report, a few things that have happened since our last meeting in December. I recently met with Rising Sun Elementary School for their Mayor for a Day essay contest. I did that today. Chief Peterson was able to go along with me. It was a great time spent with the kids, just explaining a little bit about what I do as mayor and what our town council does. We have another new business getting ready to join us on Main Street. Hatchers on Main will be doing a ribbon cutting ceremony at 11 a.m. We're asking folks to arrive at 10:30 though, and we'll be doing that right out on Main Street. It's just a testament to our efforts in our downtown revitalization that yet another new business is going to open on Main Street. We are excited to eventually have a full Main Street full of businesses that folks can enjoy and visit. Last but not least, as Chief Peterson said, January was a very hard month for the town of Rising Sun. We lost two long-term business owners, Bob Shellcross and Jim Gibney, who were with the town for many years. And then we lost Officer Dan Stickney. Our hearts are still raw with the loss of Dan. And we will continue to show love to Kara and Dan's boys, as well as with his extended family, as much as we can. Our thoughts and prayers are with them. And in any way that we can help them, we will continue to do so. Moving forward, Commissioner's comments. Commissioner Braun.
I have no report.
Commissioner Kleiner.
In light of the recent snowstorms that we've had this year, we haven't really had many for a while. I wanted to compliment the Department of Public Works for a job well done in clearing the snow and staying on top of that, and with some water main issues as well. We really appreciate you all and the whole team, everyone that works together and stays up late or works overnight. And it's like an unsung hero aspect of the Department of Public Works, but thank you so much for all of your hard work.
Thank you, Commissioner Kleiner. Commissioner Pearson, I forgot to mention this to you, but I know you have it in a report, but you also attended the staff appreciation luncheon, is that correct?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
And spoke and thanked them for what they do for us. I mean, they make our job a lot easier by being out there day to day to handle everything from the office staff who no longer talk to me, but it was just a good way to say thank you to everybody. I agree with Commissioner Kleiner about Public Works. They did they have probably the most difficult things to deal with in this town at times. Standing outside in freezing weather, fixing a water main break is just not fun. So thank you very much. But again, Dan's unfortunate death left a real note on everybody. But on a lighter note, his service outside was Dan's final way to get even with every one of us, to stand out there in that freezing cold wind. He was looking down, laughing at every one of us. So thank you, Dan, for that. That's the end of my report.
Thank you, Commissioner Pearson. On the agenda, you can see the Board of Zoning Appeals and Planning Commission schedule.
Dave?
Oh, sorry, Dave. I totally forgot you. Commissioner Warnick.
Dave?
Hey, Dave.
Wake up, little Susie. I think we lost him.
You still there?
Yeah, he's still on there.
All right, Dave, we're going to take that as no report tonight. On the agenda, you'll see our Board of Zoning Appeals and Planning Commission schedule, as well as upcoming town holidays and the trash recycling and yard waste schedule. Is there anything else to come before the board this evening? Hearing nothing, can I get a
I make
motion
a
to
motion
adjourn?
to adjourn.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.